All right, so in this recording, we're going to look at plant form and plant function and morphology, okay? This is a lot of pictures and a long PowerPoint because there's lots of pictures. Really, it's basically plant anatomy, learning plant anatomy, so just kind of try and stay focused. So here's the basics, okay? So you have the flowers of the plant, the stem, you have the leaves, you guys know this, you have fruits, and then you have the roots, which are not coming up. There they are, okay. And so let's talk about the roots first. So the function of roots is really two things. It's going to absorb water and minerals, and it helps anchor the plant into the ground, as you can see in the picture on the right. And so there's kind of two different kinds of root systems. So root systems, this is a fibrous root system. There's no main root. Think like a carrot when you think like a main root. They're made for fast water absorption, and they help hold the soil, and they prevent erosion. These are found in monocots and seedless vascular plants, okay? So like things like ferns. And then the other type of root system, it's the taproot system. It has one main root, like a carrot, and then it has smaller lateral secondary roots, okay? And they have more stronger anchorage, and they help absorb deep water. This is found in gymnosperms and dicots, okay? And now plants can modify their roots. They can have things like prop roots that helps hold them up and support. This is actually from a corn plant. They can use their supports for climbing, or their roots for climbing and support up something. They can have roots that are aquatic and help absorb water. That's from a lily. And they can modify their roots for storage and food storage, like a potato, or that's a beet. So that's kind of an example of those. Now let's look at their stems, okay? So in a herbaceous plant stem, you can have a herbaceous plant stem that's all green, or you can have a woody stem that's got a wood in it. And that's the terminal bud at the top. Okay, and then it has the axillary buds on the side. The terminal buds are where it's going to grow from. Then it has what's called lenticels, which are those little bumpy things on the wood. It has a leaf scar where the leaf might have fallen off. And then it has a terminal bud scar where last year's growth occurred. Okay, so from what you can see is from one terminal growth to the next terminal growth scar is where 1 year's growth occurred. Okay. Plants can also modify their stems, just like they modify their roots, into thorns for protection. Think like cactus, okay? They can modify them into tubers for storage. This is actually a white potato. They can modify them into stolons. That actually is a type of asexual reproduction. This is a strawberry plant that's budding off. They can modify them into things like what's called corn, which is a storage. An onion is a modified stem. They can modify them into tendrils that are used for climbing and support, this is a vine. Okay. So let's look at their leaves now. So you can see all the different parts of the leaves, and you're going to be labeling those in one of your lab activities. Obviously, if it has parallel leaves, it is a monocot, and if it has netted leaves, it is a dicot. So you can look at those pictures. Dicots can have simple leaves, that's one leaf, or they can have what's called a compound leaf. And that entire thing from where it says, see the petiole and all those little leaflets, that's actually one leaf. Where there's like 6 or 7 leaves on one, it's actually 6 or 7 leaflets on one leaf. Okay, and then the monocot, you can see all the different parts of the monocot and the dicot, and that's in your picture. So you can look at the monocot versus dicot and all their features. So you can see things like a monocot has the fibrous root system, and the dicot has the taproot system. And a monocot has parallel veins, and a dicot has netted veins. And a monocot, you guys know most of this, but has flowers in parts in 3s and 4s, and a dicot has flowers in parts of 4s or 5s. This is something new. Monocot has vascular bundles that are scattered. Those are the little parts that are these little things. These are the vascular bundles, okay? So that's where the xylem and phloem is. Whereas vascular bundles are in more of a ring structure. As you can see, this going around the ring, this is each the vascular bundles in a dicot, okay? Plant, now we're going to look at some of the anatomy. We're going to start to get inside a little bit more. So in plant tissues, they have different types of tissues, just like you have different types of tissues, muscles and epithelial and all that kind of stuff. The first kind of tissue for a plant is they have what's called ground tissue. And they have, and ground tissue can be made out of parenchyma cells, which are thin-walled, used for storage and photosynthesis, and they can also secrete things. Those are what you call the typical plant cells. Another type of ground tissue is collenchyma, and collenchyma have thick, flexible walls used for support, and they're usually found in young shoots, okay? So young shoots, young stems. Sclerenchyma are the last one. They also have thick walls, and they're used for support, and they're found where no growth is, so it's kind of like what's left behind, what's kind of no longer there. Okay. Plants also have dermal tissue. So they have ground tissue, they have dermal tissue, which is like the epidermis, this covering surface, okay? Think the guard cells, that's what that pink thing's pointing to, okay? So those are the outer cells. And they're gonna do protection and water absorption. Think in a root, they're gonna do water absorption, okay? Then you have another type of tissue is you can have vascular tissue, and this is xylem, okay, and phloem too, we're gonna get into. So xylem is gonna transport water and minerals. It's made out of tracheids, which are really long, thin cells with tapered ends. You can see those ones on the right. And then it's also made through vessel elements. And the vessel elements are shorter, wider, and they're also fatter. So you can see that in the fatter cells here, that would be a vessel element, and then these would be tracheids if you were looking down on them. But either way, they're big fat cells with really pretty thick walls. And they're all dead, key part, dead cells, okay? Vascular tissue, that's phloem, a little bit smaller, and it's obviously transporting food, and they have two types. They have sieve tube members and companion cells. And when we get into how the phloem actually works later this next semester, at the very beginning of next semester, you're gonna see why those are important. Just know there's two different types, okay? So cells can grow in two different ways. They have primary growth, which is growth in length. And it happens at what's called the apical meristems, and it happens at the tips of the roots and the tips of the shoots. Okay, and you can see that's where lots of mitosis is occurring in that case. And then there's secondary growth, which is growth in width. And that's where you have lateral meristems. And there's the vascular cambium and the cork cambium. So the vascular cambium and the cork cambium. We'll look at those parts in a little bit. The cork cambium is going to be more on the outside. In the root tip, though, you have what's called, the first area is you have the root cap, which protects the apical meristem. Then the next area is going to be the zone of cell division. That's where actual cell, that's the apical meristem. That's where the cells are dividing, mitosis is happening, things are occurring, okay? Then you can have the zone of elongation. That's where cells are gonna absorb water, they're gonna elongate, they're gonna get longer, okay? They're gonna start to grow. And then you have the zone of maturation. So you kind of have those 4 zones and they go. That's where cells are maturing. They're going to start to perform specific functions. They're going to start to differentiate. You're going to get some root hairs. All those things are going to happen in that area. Okay. This is a herbaceous dicot stem. So you might want to highlight that because this is not a tree. Think it's like a green plant with a green stem. So this is what it looks like. That's got its epidermis, its outer layer of cells, and it provides protection. And then inside is the cortex, where it's pointing there, okay, just right there. It's made out of ground tissue, and there might be chloroplast because it's green. Hey, cording. And then there's, just come back. And then there's pith in the middle, and there's storage area, and then it provides support through like turgor pressure, okay, so just think like lots of osmosis happening there. And then there's the vascular bundle, which is the xylem and phloem, and it occurs in the rings structure, remember, because this is a dicot, so it's going to occur in the ring structure. Now we're going to zoom in on one of these, okay, one of these vascular bundles there. So the vascular bundle, so we've zoomed in on one of them. It has the bundle cap with cells that are dead, fibrous, and thick-walled, big fat cells, okay? And then these are mostly sclerenchyma, those old cells, and then they're going to help provide support, okay? And then you also, in your vascular bundle, you're going to have your phloem, which transports food, with sieve tube members that are long living cells, and then you're also going to have your companion cells that are smaller parenchyma cells. And then you're also going to have your xylem. Those are your big cells transporting water. They're dead tracheids that are dead with their thick wall, and then you have your vessel elements that are larger in diameter, and they're also dead. And then finally you have your vascular cambium, which is between the xylem and the phloem, and that's where cells are dividing to make for your secondary growth to make the xylem and the phloem. Okay. Now let's look at a woody stem. So in the center, so this is picture like a tree. Okay. In the center you have your pith. Then you have a lot of xylem, which is your wood. Okay. And you can have summer wood, which are smaller cells because there's less water available. And you can have your spring wood, which is where there's larger cells because there's more water available. And you can see the annual ring. There's the first year's growth, and then the second year's growth, and then the third year's growth. Okay, that's the secondary growth. And then you have your bark, where there's phloem, and then there's the cortex. Okay, and so that's kind of where the outside part is. And in between the xylem and phloem, just like in a herbaceous dicot stem, you have your vascular cambium between your xylem and phloem that's going to help produce new cells, the secondary growth. And then Now we're going to look at some roots, okay? So here's a dicot root cross-section. So if you're looking at a dicot root, that's the epidermis on the outside that's going to absorb the water. There's root hairs to help increase the surface area for water absorption, and it also helps provide protection in the epidermis. Then you're going to have your cortex. That's where all the storage of starch occurs. That's what all those little purple things are. And then you have your vascular cylinder, or also known as your stelae, and that's where you have your xylem and phloem, okay? And then there's an endodermis that outlines it to help protect it, and we'll talk about how that works and why that's important when we look at water transport in plants. And so we're going to zoom in on your vascular cylinder. There's your xylem, your big fat cells, large dead cells that transport water and minerals. And then there's your vascular cylinder parts that are phloem, okay? And they're small dead cells that transport food. And then you have your endodermis with your Casparian strip that's waxy and helps form a barrier. It helps regulate what goes through. So everything has to go through the endodermis or that Casparian strip before entering the stelae, before entering the vascular cylinder. So you can kind of help regulate it. It's kind of like a larger cell membrane in that sense. And then up at the top, okay, last thing, we're going to look at the leaf here, okay, because up at the top of the tree. So the upper epidermis, which provides protection, and it has a cuticle that is waxy and it decreases the water loss, okay? And then on the lower epidermis, that's where you have your stomata, those little holes that allow carbon dioxide in and water and oxygen out, because photosynthesis is occurring. And they're surrounded by guard cells, the cells that protect them and help open and close them. And then you have palisade mesophyll, which is made out of parenchyma cell. They're very tightly packed cells, and that's where lots of photosynthesis is occurring. And then you can have spongy mesophyll, where there's more parenchyma cells that are loosely arranged, and there's more photosynthesis is occurring. And there's air spaces to help with gas exchange from photosynthesis. And then finally, you have your vascular bundle, or these are also known as veins at this point, because you have your xylem, your bigger cells, and your phloem, which is green, and then there's a bundle sheath cells surrounding the bundles that help kind of protect it. And that's all. I know it's a lot, and I talked fast because there is a lot, but just kind of go through, go back over it, look at the pictures again. You have all the pictures. We're going to do a lab with it. It's really just you guys got to learn where things are and what they do. That's